You're welcome to the Gavel. I'm Linda Akibi. The National Assembly has overturned its earlier decision making direct primaries compulsory for the nomination of candidates by political parties. While the Senate re-amended Clause 84, subsection 2, approving direct, indirect primaries or consensus as procedures for the nomination of candidates by political parties, the House of Representatives did not approve the consensus method of nominating candidates for elective positions. We have reactions from lawmakers themselves on this action, as well as civil society organizations.
When President Buhari wrote to the National Assembly in December of 2021 explaining the reasons for withholding assent to the bill, lawmakers in the House of Representatives were undecided on the next line of action. The news was received with a stronger reaction in the upper chamber as senators collated names to override the president.
We had the power to override him. That was what section 58, 4 and 5 said. So if the Constitution gives us the provision to do so, we use our powers to do it.
However, both chambers decided to wait till resumption in 2022 to make a decision. While the National Assembly was on break, debates raged in the public space on the need for the National Assembly to either override the president or amend the direct primaries option and quickly return it to the president for assent. Attention is on these legislators in the Senate and House of Representatives on resumption on Tuesday, January the 18th, to find out the response to the president's refusal to sign the Electoral Act Amendment Bill into law. The House of Representatives set a date for considering the Electoral Act Amendment Bill.
I remain convinced that the proposal for direct primary elections is valuable for building accountability in our political system. But we must not allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. Therefore, the House will reintroduce the amendment tomorrow, and we will work quickly to address the mitigating concerns, pass the bill, and send it back to His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari for assent.
The Speaker also raised concern over the drafting and technical errors in the bill pointed out by the President.
This is a matter of concern, as it appears the version sent to the President differs from what is circulating in the public domain. However, in December of last year, I appointed a technical team to look into the issue. I expect to have their report within the next day or two.
The Senate President assures that the upper chamber will give the bill expected action.
Like we all know, the Senate and indeed the National Assembly worked so hard on the bill. Having consulted, the Senate will expeditiously look into the issue.
It also approved that a political party that adopts direct primaries shall ensure that all aspirants are given equal opportunity of being voted for by members of the party. It further approved that in the case of presidential primaries, all registered members of the party are to vote for aspirants of their choice at a designated center at each ward of the federation. For indirect primaries, in the case of nominations to the opposition of presidential candidate, a political party shall hold a special presidential convention at a designated center in the FCT or any other place within the federation, agreed to by the National Executive Committee of the party.
I am convinced that all the political parties will look and take advantage of this new law by the time Mr. President signs it. With this, we also hope and pray that INEC, the electoral body, will take advantage of all the available amendments, including what they suggested to the committees, will be amendments that will enhance their activities, their performance. We will still be around to ensure that INEC receives every possible support from this Senate and indeed the National Assembly for that electoral monitoring body to conduct the 2023 elections successfully, transparently, and with the integrity that Nigerians will all be proud of when it comes to either off-season elections or the general elections in 2023.
A letter was written by Mr. President.
The House of Representatives also followed the path of the Senate by rescinding its earlier decision on compulsory direct primaries. However, it does not adopt consensus procedure for nominating candidates.
It is my considered position that the political parties should be allowed to freely exercise a right of choice in deciding which of direct or indirect primaries to adopt in the conduct of their primary elections. So basically, our rules have tied our hands. We can't even go outside that clause to inject any other thing, even if we so desire.
The Senate and the House of Representatives will now have to form a conference committee to harmonize their positions on consensus candidates for party primaries. However, this may delay the speedy conclusion of the process.
Following the decision of the National Assembly to rescind its earlier stance on compulsory direct primaries, we spoke to some lawmakers to find out why they changed their minds from their earlier position.
Honestly speaking, I think the president gave out some very cogent explanation, and I think some people also had an opportunity to go back home and really talk to the electorates and look at it deeply. Now, let me give you a scenario. We're in the middle of insurgency and war, if we want to call it that, in some parts of the country. And if we had passed the bill as it was presented, then that means even in Zamfara, even some of these difficult areas, they have no option. No, now, with the way it is now, even in those areas, you can decide, okay, because of the level of insecurity, because of the banditry, because of the killings, we cannot afford to expose people to that kind of, and we may have to opt for an indirect option or a consensus option. So really what has happened now is that it's not that direct is still not in the bill, it's just that they've just added more options so that at least, which is still democratic, people can, parties can decide amongst themselves, the method they want to use. And also that leaves the electorate to decide who they want to vote for. So if for some reason you feel APC is using an indirect platform and you are not happy with the indirect platform, and you feel AGC, another party or whatever, is using a direct option, you have an option to go and vote for. So it just gives more option, and I think that better suits the situation that we are in Nigeria today.
Since Mr. President has objected to just that clause 84, on direct primaries, for the purpose of nominating candidates for elections, we said, fine, let's expunge it. Just deal with that aspect alone that he had objected to and pass it on to him. Even when some of us are convinced that there is more than meets the eye when it comes to insistence on direct primary. Why the hype of direct primary? Why all this noise, the hula baloo about the direct primary? And the reason of insecurity, the reason of COVID-19, the reason of cost, all of them are not germane at all to the issues on ground. For instance, if we are incapable of providing security for 8,812 council wards in Nigeria to conduct direct primary for candidates, how are we going to be able to provide security to conduct election in over 120,000 polling units in Nigeria? Besides that, even in the indirect primary that we're talking about here, we have to select the ad hoc delegates. And the ad hoc delegates are selected by direct primary, all card-carrying members of the party. In all the council wards of Nigeria, 8,812. So, whether you're doing direct primary or doing indirect primary, you still have to go back to the party members across the country. That's to tell you that that excuse is simply nebulous. So, weighing all the conveniences around us, majority of us agreed that we should allow the adjustment, the reworking of the bill, to go so that Mr. President can sign, and then we'll have an electoral act that provides for our electoral process of using the card reader electronic voting and electronic transmission of results, gender equality, gender participation, and all the other fantastic aspects of the law. That is what we think is the best in the circumstances, because at the end of the day, the Electoral Act, like all Nigerian laws, are life instruments. They can be revoked at any time.
We also caught up with some federal lawmakers after legislative proceedings during the week to also get their thoughts on the matter.
The House based their decision on the president's position that indirect should be incorporated as an option. So that's exactly what the House has done today. So the House decided to honor Mr. President by respecting his opinion. As it is right now, we have inserted the indirect. So I think the consensus, it wasn't discussed here. So the position, we just heard that the Senate has passed consensus, but for here, it wasn't part of the proposal that we have before the House. So what we had as a House before now was the issue of indirect and direct. So we actually settled on the two.
A lot of our members who have consulted, their constituents came back and said, well, there was a need to give the latitude, to the parties so that the people will have option. Having the option of direct, indirect, or consensus, And I think that was the issue, the president raised too, that made him to withhold assent. Now that latitude is given, but let me say this, we're very mindful, in saying that to be consensus, to be direct or indirect or consensus, not as the parties wish. Okay, so they are still within the confines, of those three methods.
First of all, everything is democratic. I believe people went home and reasons were brought up that we should not box the party in one choice only, and people tend to rescind their decision, and that's really what really happens. Some people really say, okay, be that the case, let us not be having problems with our parties, with the government and everybody. Let us put even the indirect primaries and the direct primaries, and then also the consensus. So whatever happens at the end of the day, the party will not blame the National Assembly for making a law that is difficult for them.
Members didn't think that the consensus was as democratic as the interment of the amendments were scheduled. And from the letter that was transmitted to the National Assembly for reconsideration, so that it makes it easier for the president to assent, what was originally in the part 42B that was considered was 42 was a mode of primaries to be direct or indirect. But I think the House has done justice to those sections in contention or with grey issues, wherein we have sought the opinion of our constituents and the general Nigerians, and we have delivered a section that is well acceptable to all and sundry, which by implication is that political parties now owe it a duty of care, a duty to aspirants to conduct primaries in either direct or indirect, whichever suits them.
How does a party determine its consensus candidate? These are some of the things you should look at. You cannot give a vague, so a political party, the chairman of the party can decide in a room who the consensus candidate can be. If there are steps to it and determine what it means to have a consensus candidate, and if we see the document, then we can consider that the president only made an observation and objected to a particular proviso in the bill, and that is what we dealt with today. Nothing more, nothing else. And even the provisions in the House didn't give us the leeway. Our laws didn't give us the leeway to add or to remove anything else, but to deal with the issues the president has said we should do.
Welcome back to the Gavel. Civil society organizations are urging the Senate to immediately reverse the proposed provision for consensus candidates in the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Reacting to the National Assembly's amendment procedure, 12 organizations signed a statement saying that the Senate's proposal is antithetical to democratic principles and will result in the subversion of popular will.
All I said, there should be options. We must not insist that it has to be direct. It should be consensus and indirect.
So if they do that, would you sign it?
Yes, I will.
President Muhammadu Buhari announcing his readiness to sign the Electoral Act Amendment Bill if the section that makes direct primaries as a mode of selecting candidates by political parties is expunged. One of the first legislative activities of the National Assembly for the new year is the reamendment of the controversial section. This is one of the demands of civil society groups as they seek urgent action on the bill ahead of off-season elections in the Federal Capital Territory, Ekiti, and Osun states.
How do you get what does it take them to remove the consensus? What is the problem with that? Are you with me that the consensus thing is undemocratic? If it's undemocratic, why do you make it a law? That law will protect people from carrying out undemocratic acts. At the end of the day, what does a law, when you make a law, when you amend a law, what is the intendment of that amendment? To cure certain challenges that law faces. So we have agreed that there are sunshine issues that are contained in that bill. Okay? But to continue to play with this also signifies what we have continued to say, there is a collective elite conspiracy. Because if you don't quickly pass this law, then you are seriously not saying that you want INEC to have its money 1 year before the election. You are saying you don't want a situation in which the returning officers the calls they make can be reviewed. You are saying you don't want electronic. That's actually what you're saying.
The consensus option it's always been problematic. And I think that is the real reason why people are actually asking for direct primaries again, because it allows for the imposition of persons on the party. And you know, it's this whole idea about consensus candidacy that delivers party to the few oligarchs or godfathers, or call them godfathers, or even business enterprise, because it is taking away the right of citizens, the rights of party members to actually choose who they want to fly the flag of the party in the elections. And at the end of the day, then we have candidates that we do not want, giving us choiceless democracy. And it's all interrelated. Then during elections, we'll then start talking about voter apathy. Most times when we talk about voter apathy, the turnout is very low. Citizens are in turnout because of fear of violence, because they are afraid that their votes will not count, or just the stress of even voting, and democracy has not delivered development to the people. One thing we rarely talk about is that the choices on the ballot paper itself, the choices on the ballot does not actually inspire people to turn up to vote.
During the amendment of Clause 84, which deals with the nomination of candidates, both chambers agreed that political parties can adopt direct or indirect options. However, the Senate included consensus method of nominating candidates, an action that members of civil societies are kicking against.
The Senate, introduced consensus as part of the procedure for nomination of candidates, and that's unacceptable. We reject in totality that particular provision because consensus as a procedure for nomination of candidates is antithetical to democratic ethos, and it will amount to a subversion of popular will. It will limit, and restrict the rights that aspirants have to contest. And it's a compromise. It compromises choice, because what you have at the end of the day is that voters will be left with no option but to vote for candidates that emanate out of undemocratic primaries, or did not emanate or evolve from democratic primaries. Or it's pretty much, they vote for candidates that are selected by hegemons or oligarchs in political parties.
Civil society groups are still hoping that the amendment process can be concluded on or before the January 21st, 2022 deadline.
Let's take a look at more happenings in the National Assembly during the week. The House of Representatives is to investigate alleged missing firearms and ammunition of the Nigeria Police Force in excess of 178,000 since 2019. This is sequel to the reports of the Auditor General to the Public Accounts Committee of the House. The report suggests that the arms and ammunition which the police claims to have purchased cannot be accounted for. The matter was raised by the Deputy Minority Leader of the House as a motion of urgent public importance.
The House is aware of the findings in the report that the Police High Command failed to keep record of unserviceable and expired firearms and ammunition owing to non-compliance to the internal control system of the Nigerian Police Force.
The House of Representatives has mandated the Committees on Health Institutions and Healthcare Services to liaise with the Federal Ministry of Health towards improving mental health facilities around the country. Representative Uchechukwu Namobi, who moved the motion, stated that 3 out of 10 Nigerians have one form of mental illness or the other. However, presently there is no mental health legislation in Nigeria.
The House further notes that according to the World Health Organization, statistics of over 20 million Nigerians are currently suffering from the various degrees of mental illness or disorder without psychiatric help or care.
A bill for an act to establish the Federal College of Education in Idiri has scaled second reading in the House of Representatives. The bill, when passed, will provide for the appointment of provost and other officers of the college to carry out the administration and discipline of students of the institution.
A bill for an act to establish Federal College of Education, Idiri, Oyo State, to provide full-time courses, teaching, instruction and training technology, applied science, arts, social sciences, humanities and management, and provide for the appointment of provosts and other officers of the college to carry out the administration and discipline of students of the college, and for related matters be read a second time.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is calling for an end to the black soot in Rivers State and other parts of the South-South caused by illegal refining of crude oil in the region. The House, through a motion raised by Representative Onyime Idem, is concerned that these activities have negatively affected economic growth of the region and impacted adversely on the health of the people. Lawmakers are disappointed that some security agencies are alleged to be involved in illegal refining of crude, and they are asking the heads of the security agencies and relevant committees of the House to investigate and report back within 6 weeks.
Concerned that the Niger Delta region of the country has over the years been plagued by the activities of illegal oil refineries at the detriment of the lives of residents and the economy of the country. Worried that a particular case is the suit currently suffered by citizens and residents of Rivers State and the environs in the last 3 years as a result of incomplete burning of organic matter by these illegal refiners.
As the race to the 2023 general elections intensifies, the former governor of Abia State and chief whip of the Senate, Senator Ojuzo Kalu, has described as unserious presidential aspirants in his party who have gone to inform President Buhari about their intentions to run. Speaking in an interview with journalists at the National Assembly on Wednesday, he says those already pushing are not being fair to the feelings of Nigerians.
I told you before, I'm not a liar. It's only when the party zones it officially to the south. I told you before, the only 2 zones that have not been president, the southeast and the northeast. Once they zone it to any one of them, I have the capacity and the capability. And I will roll and I'll rock like hurricane. I don't believe in Igbo president. I believe in Nigerian president of Igbo extraction. It's only APC people, like we're going to have our convention, will decide where the presidential ticket will go to. If they say it, I have everything it takes to make a good president.
Now this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of the Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on the Gavel at channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.